Hi, this is Brad Pilcher, Sara Glassberg's co-pilot on this podcast, except today, where I'm only going to be here for a brief moment to tell you some very important information. The podcast is going away. Temporarily, not forever, just for a little bit. You see, the 2021 Atlanta Jewish Film Festival has come and gone, and we're all a little tired. So we're going to take a brief hiatus, and the show will return in April. So don't worry if you don't see us in your podcast feed. It's okay. The show still exists, and you will still hear from us again very soon. But before we go, there is one last show that you might enjoy. The awards show. The 2021 AJFF Awards, including audience awards and jury prizes, are going to be announced on March 10th at 7 p.m. Now, you can watch it anytime after that. You just can't watch it until then. But you also need a ticket. So go to ajff.org/awardshow, get your ticket, and enjoy all of the announcements of our audience award winners, the best narratives, the best docs, our jury prize winners, which is appropriate because this episode of the podcast is all about the jury prizes. I guess we timed that pretty well. So enjoy this episode and then enjoy the awards show and then enjoy a break. And we'll see you all again in April.
Hi, I'm Sara Glassberg, and this is AJFF in Conversation, the Jewish Film Podcast. For those of you who may not know, I got my start with the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival as a student juror, an experience that was incredibly rewarding. And it happened to be AJFF's first year awarding jury prizes, and I was in my first year as a master's student at Emory University. The AJFF jury prizes have been an integral part of our annual festival ever since, and this year is certainly no different, despite many things about this year's festival being different. Just like with much of our guest programming in general this year, virtual afforded us unique opportunities, including assembling such an all-star roster of jurors, and we'll definitely want to highlight that today. But we also wanted to bring you a conversation that looks at why we have jury prizes and how ours work a little differently, even in a normal year, and much, much more. So joining me today for this conversation about all things jury at AJFF and beyond is our very own jury wrangler, Gabe Wardell. Gabe, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. You are our jury wrangler. And so I think part of my first question is going to be, what does that entail? But even beyond that and beyond AJFF specifically, I would love to hear first, what kinds of different roles you've had related to festival juries and how you kind of got into this world.
I have been doing film festival work for quite a while, since back when film festivals actually showed films on celluloid. And my original experiences with film festivals came as a projectionist, believe it or not. So I had been invited through a crazy set of circumstances to the very first Slam Dance Film Festival. And I really say it's the first because the prior year was just them showing up with films. This was their first curated festival. So they technically call it their second year, but it's really their first proper festival. And they were very disorganized. It was just a ragtag team of folks. And through a strange set of circumstances, a kid from Baltimore who worked at a video store ran into somebody who knew somebody there who they needed a projectionist. And so on less than a week's notice, they flew me out to Park City, threw me into this crazy environment. And so I was the projectionist at Slam Dance. What happened that very first year when they were doing that festival is they also had some travel issues, and some of the additional jurors who were supposed to attend were not able to attend. So it came down to the night before the awards, and they were literally scrambling for jurors. And they just so happened to recognize that I had seen all the films as the projectionist. And it became a tradition from that point on to include a projectionist on the jury every year since. So that was my real first jury experience and one of my earliest film festival experiences. And so from there, I've spent a number of years doing film festival programming at the Maryland Film Festival. I had worked in Silver Docks in DC, right outside of DC in Silver Spring, Maryland, as the producer of that festival, and subsequently worked in the Atlanta Film Festival as the executive director. And that is where a lot of that experience came from. And of course, throughout those years, I've been invited to sit on a number of juries, from Sidewalk Film Festival, the Out on Film here in Atlanta, all over the country. Had wonderful experiences working with film festivals as a juror. And so subsequently, that experience now comes into play, and I get to bring that breadth of knowledge into what we're doing here at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like you have worn almost every hat. And so I think, as jury wrangler, my understanding of it, and, I'd love to hear any other thoughts you have about that particular role with our festival. But yeah, you're kind of bringing all that knowledge to the process and helping our jurors kind of get acclimated to the process and leading them through, deliberations, and just being a great resource and point of contact for them. So, it definitely, everything that you have done for various film festivals, I could definitely see coming into play in that role with us.
Absolutely. And there's a tendency, and it's natural, on juries to appreciate all of the work and to say, well, this is good, and we would like to give this a prize, and gosh, isn't this wonderful? And of course, yes, all of the films are amazing. The job of the jury isn't to reflect that back to the audience. It really is to help pick a handful of exceptional films. These are the noteworthy ones. These are the films you're going to give a special signature to. You're really putting it into its own category. And so the jury's job isn't to say everything's an honorable mention, here's this prize. It is to make some difficult decisions. And the real difficult challenge I think juries face is coming up with consensus views, right? It's not always just majority rules to these two people said yes, this third person said no, we're going to go with this title. It really is the jury's job to come up with consensus decisions, because the jury in each category needs to sign off on that decision. And that is where the horse trading happens. That is where the negotiations happen. That is where you see the real impassioned, deep conversations about the subject matter or the topic of the film, or even the festival itself. Juries often question, how does this film reflect the values and mission of this festival? And in the case of the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, there are a number of very special categories within it. But the overall sense when you're on this jury isn't just to say, well, I like this film best. It is what film best reflects the mission, values, and particularly the focus of the prize we're looking at.
Yeah, having done this as a student juror for 2 years for AJFF, it is very difficult to come up with that consensus, but at the same time, it's a very rewarding, fulfilling experience to kind of have those different perspectives and really just trying to look at it not as you said, like the best film or the film that one person or two people liked best and have the conversation that way. It gets really deep, and it gets really, you're looking at a whole slew of criteria, including, of course, as you said, what exactly is that prize going to, and, how is that worded, and where does that fit in with, the festival that the jury is for. And so we'll definitely want to touch on in a few minutes, some of the unique prizes that you referred to that AJFF in particular, gives out. I guess I'd like to know next why, with all of that in mind and all of your different experiences, why do you think jury prizes are important, or, what do they add to a festival?
I think jury prizes add a number of very special elements to a film festival. One is that if a festival has prizes, then the festival is making a statement right? It's actually making a statement to the industry, to the community, and to the filmmakers themselves that we are we are taking the process seriously, and that we're actually wanting to reflect our stamp back to the world. And that is different than festivals that don't issue prizes, that say, every film that got in is exceptional and here's why we've done this. One of my great early experiences was at the Maryland Film Festival, and it was a point of pride for that festival to not have any awards, that they did not want that competitive spirit between filmmakers, but overall they wanted the whole festival to be this egalitarian experience, that everybody who's here is here as our guest, that they're all on equal footing. We're celebrating the work. That's terrific, and I think that's a wonderful mission. And the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival spent many years on that tier. When you add the competitive level, you are doing two things. One is you're incentivizing filmmakers to want to submit to your festival. Films these days really benefit when they have a prize attached to them. It gets the attention of distributors and audiences and so forth. And these days, when the media landscape is so varied and so vast, and people can see films in so many different places, and when the amount of distribution channels is both vast and broad, it's hard for certain films to stand out. So getting an award, earning an award at a festival such as this really helps benefit a filmmaker and helps benefit the career of the people associated with that movie. The second thing it does is it actually invites the outside world into your festival. So we'll talk a little bit in a moment about the jurors themselves, but inviting these jurors to take a look at your festival helps amplify the impact of what you're doing. And that's the real benefit, I think, for the Atlanta Film Festival, that for years, the people here have known how great this festival is. It's one of the best kept secrets, let's say, in the industry, however, because we all know and our audiences know, and the numbers dictate this, it is the best festival in this market by a long shot. And without the attention of the industry, it's like a tree falling in the forest, right? Nobody hearing. When you invite people from the professional guilds, when you invite professional critics, when you invite filmmakers and honorees and people from esteemed positions in Hollywood into your festival, they now get that experience as well. And they come away from it saying, my goodness, this this Jewish Film Festival in Atlanta is the real deal. And this is one of the great benefits of having the jury prizes for the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. And this is where I think it's really gone to that next level.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more, just now being on this other side of it, seeing this kind of cyclical or reciprocal kind of thing happen where we invite these fabulous, again, film critics or journalists or people in the industry, cinematographers, filmmakers, and they might be in Hollywood, they might be who knows where. And in a normal year, we would fly them in. And I think the way that we run our process, I can think of stories of, they then go back and maybe in a subsequent year, they'll help us secure another juror because they had such a good experience. And then to the filmmaker side of it, I could totally see then that it's just compounding, the reputation that AJFF has. And then a film has that laurel, it won. And it just cycles on like that, which I think is really beautiful, especially as a festival that, we've only been doing this for a few years, and already I'm starting to see it kind of build and go in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely amplifies the power and impact of the film. And it is self-perpetuating, that it makes filmmakers more attracted to applying for the festival. At the same time, it's elevating the status on the professional circuit. And so these things compound and build and ultimately improve the quality for everybody, which is a win-win situation.
Yeah, I love that so much. I mean, the jury process, again, it's how I got my foot in the door with the festival, and first kind of experienced it. I was new to Atlanta. I was getting a master's degree at Emory, and now again seeing it from this other perspective and really working on it, it's still just one of my favorite things that we do in the annual festival and in general. But something that we've started to touch on a little bit is, the uniqueness of the AJFF jury prizes and how we do them, which I think everything that we've just been saying is still true, but something that's so magical to me about how AJFF does it is that we still kind of keep what makes AJFF unique, within, its place within the Atlanta community, as well as this larger film industry community. So starting with one of the two things that I think makes the AJFF Jury Prizes super unique, and I just would love to hear your thoughts on it, is this idea of having a student juror, and not just a student juror, but in addition to these industry folks that we would normally, welcome here and have them travel in and do all that for them. There's also, an emphasis on having a student juror on each prize, as well as every panel, pretty much having someone also a local activist, academic, expert, things like that. And so I think, again, that keeps its Atlanta flavor, and the student thing in particular, I think, is pretty unique. At least I haven't heard of many other festivals doing that. So yeah, is that all something you've seen elsewhere? Or, again, I could certainly speak forever to what I think it adds and why it's important, but from my own perspective, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts and on whether and how, that's very special to us.
Sure. It is unique to my experience. I have not seen that process implemented quite this way, particularly the addition of students on each level of the jury process. I will say it is similar to the slam dance experience with the projectionist, this idea of having a wild card, as it were, in the mix, that it is somebody who will definitely bring a different experience from the others. What I especially like about having students here is that your experience as a student is, I would argue, much more idealistic. It's a pure, visceral, and intellectual reaction in a way that I think sometimes, particularly professionals and industry professionals and journalists, might come at it with a different agenda. They come at it with a different preconceived notions. There's something about that student experience that's a more primary, idealistic, and I would argue just a fresh perspective. And the other thing I like about it is it forces this cross-generational conversation that no matter how you cut it, your students are going to skew much younger than any of the esteemed professionals who make their way onto the jury. So it's going to require a cross-generational conversation. And the most important thing we've learned this past year, I would argue, is that all of us could stand to listen a lot more to the points of view of other people. And the youthful perspective is going to be something that will definitely add to the conversation, that it's not going to be easy for somebody to go into a room with two other folks and say, here's the prize, it's going to be this one, don't you all agree? That a student is hopefully going to bring that passion, that idealism, and that voice of the future. And I think that's such a critical part of what is happening in this jury process. And I think it's going to be a little bit like in the play, in the film 12 Angry Men, when you have the one holdout who is going to require the examination of all of the evidence before we advance to a decision. I've seen juries, quite honestly, in my experience, that it can be very cynical. You can literally go into a room and people can all be like, we all agree on this, right? Okay, good. That is not the spirit of the process. That is not what is intended. You are supposed to unpack these things and have these conversations. And I believe the presence of the student keeps it honest, keeps it. They serve as the conscience of the jury. If that doesn't sound too romantic, that they are there to make sure that conversation happens.
Yeah, I again could have a whole episode where I just sort of, I don't know, wax poetic or kind of, again, reflect a lot on my own experiences as a student juror. I think everything that you mentioned as to why, what perspective it adds, I think is crucial. And we have students that are, again, I was a master's student, but we have, adult students who are just getting their bachelor's or getting another bachelor's. We have grad students who are, on the filmmaker side. We have undergrad students who maybe aren't even necessarily majoring in film. But yeah, just for my own, just to add a couple of quick things before we move on from this, because again, it's just so, I think it's just one of the best things that, a jury can have as part of it. And I think that we got the idea from Indie Memphis when we launched this, actually. So we're definitely not the only festival that does it, which is great. And, I think on the whole, the response has been extremely positive, for the most part, even from the professionals. We've had a lot of response afterwards of, wow, I've never been on a jury with a student and they made me think about things really differently. Or, from my own perspective, my first year, I was put on a jury with the Deborah Lipstadt, and it turned into a TA position with her the next year at Emory. And during the jury process itself, in our category, there was a satirical film, and it was a little, controversial in its approach, and it was the Human Rights Prize. And so that's going to be a good segue to our unique prizes. But I just remember, like, that film, I couldn't quite get consensus around that one, and we went with a different one that was extremely worthy. But I remember both my fellow jurors, including Deborah Lipstadt, being like, I'm going to have to go revisit that film. Like, you've made me kind of want to view it through a different lens and kind of give it another chance. And then it eventually went on to Netflix, and I've been recommending this film, ever since. And it goes by a couple different titles, so I don't want to get the title wrong, but I think it was a French film called We Are Everywhere, or We Are something, and I apologize for forgetting it to our listeners. We will add it in the show notes. But anyway, so those are all my sort of scattered positive thoughts on the jury, not just from my own perspective, but from what we've been hearing ever since we started doing it. So I'm glad that you agree that, it really adds something. The second, again, I'm biased, I think so, but most of the response about it has been in line with that, which is just really nice for me to hear, and I think for all of us to hear that that it really does add something. The other thing that I think adds something that we've touched on so far, I want to talk about just a little bit more, is we have we have jury prizes for things like Best Narrative, Best Documentary, and Best Short. And that I think is pretty industry standard. You can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, of course. But we also have prizes for Emerging Filmmaker, Human Rights, and Building Bridges. The Emerging Prize goes to a rising creative talent. Human Rights goes to a film that best captures the perseverance and strength of those whose sense of justice guides them in the face of bigotry, inequality, and persecution. And then Building Bridges goes to the film that most encapsulates our mission, informed by founder and partner American Jewish Committee, to foster understanding among diverse religious, ethnic, and cultural groups. I think those prizes are important to a festival like ours because we do tend to just show a lot of films. And it's important to us to show a lot of films that do create that dialogue around, universal themes, maybe facing multiple communities, including but not limited to the Jewish community. So we obviously want to honor artistry and also storytelling that is, powerful in that way. What are your thoughts on those categories in particular, based maybe on what you've seen other festivals give prizes for? And what do you think these categories add to our festival and our jury?
Well, I feel that the Emerging Filmmaker is such an important award for many reasons. It's it's a huge burden, again, as a young filmmaker, to make your name in the industry, to get the funding to do your next production. And one of the things that makes festivals like Slamdance and Sundance and Toronto and uh, Telluride and some of the bigger ones around the world, what makes them so uh, exciting is that every year they introduce to the world the next wave or next crop of filmmakers. And even as they create these tremendous slates of content every year, only a few of those filmmakers will then proceed to make second, third features and move on to successful careers in the industry. So having an opportunity to mark and to celebrate and to honor an emerging filmmaker is an important role that every festival can do. And so that's why that prize is so important, because it helps establish a reputation and show a young talent as this person is somebody to watch. And they don't necessarily have to be young. Obviously, you can be an emerging filmmaker and be 60 years old if it's your first film. But the general consensus is obviously these are going to be people who are early in their careers, and so generally younger. And I think that that's a huge opportunity, and it's very important. And then ideally, right, these filmmakers will establish a relationship with this festival, so that over years, as their careers blossom, you will say, I knew them back when they were these ragtag kids who came up with their first feature. Likewise, because of the nature of the Jewish Film Festival and really being about this, the Jewish experience around the world, the human rights portion of this and that award is so important. It's a great opportunity to showcase um, works that honor uh, things that are so important to the Jewish experience around the world and the legacy of so many important people. So the Human Rights Award is a universal prize. It's something people will recognize, not just from from the region and from the United States, but around the world. And it also is extremely beneficial as we record this on the day that is honored as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It is so important to recognize that Atlanta itself is the cradle of the modern American civil rights movement, which is one of the great human rights movements on the planet. And so these things are well integrated into our fabric as Atlantans and as people who are living in this region. And so honoring that with a prize like this is huge. And then lastly, building bridges flows directly from that last conversation. It's so important to recognize that the cultural experience or the religious experience of people of Jewish descent and Jewish background is not an isolated experience. And making inroads, making efforts, and making it a constant process to build bridges to other communities, and likewise extend dialogue with those communities through cultural exchange, through the creative outlet that film provides, is such a huge and important part of the mission of this festival. And so honoring films that celebrate that is really important. And it's so interesting to note that when we look at the content that comes through this festival in general, it is so international in flavor that there are times when, as Americans, we sometimes feel isolated from the rest of the world. And without wanting to be overtly political, having a worldview that insists that you're the best or that you're isolated from the rest of the world is counter to not only the Jewish experience, but the American experience. And that isolationism is, in fact, a formula for disaster. that we are building bridges is the only path forward, that we require this dialogue. And so in many respects, this festival does such a good job of being an international presence that building bridges can sometimes literally not even be about Jewish content reaching out to other religious cultures or other social cultures, but literally be, we have films from France and Denmark and Germany and all over the world, that these are the bridges we're building are back to these other countries that we are in danger of isolating ourselves from. So keeping those dialogues fluid and in motion is so critical to what this festival stands for. So having a prize for that, it really, that's the one that I think is most representative of the festival itself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with building bridges, again, that's our way of kind of keeping front and center our mission and how that mission is informed by American Jewish Committee, who was our founder, and our partner. And something else that I thought of while you were, articulating that, and I couldn't have articulated that better myself, but the ways in which it's very difficult for the jurors to pick the film that's going to be the winner. I should just mention that as a process, it's equally tricky at times to really, if we could, I get that the competitive spirit you were talking about earlier in the episode, is what it adds, but just from a staff perspective, so many of the films that have made it in are cream of the crop already, can fit into multiple categories. I mean, the year that I was on the Human Rights Prize, we had a film, the winning film was a documentary about a Jewish person who happened to be leading the fight for, the equal opportunity for LGBTQ people to be able to marry, the freedom to marry, I think was the title. And, that could have been a building bridges film because of the ways in which it was, again, an intersection between the Jewish community and LGBTQ plus community, and the ways in which those often intersect even within one subject or one character. It's just as tricky to kind of put these things into categories when so many of the films that we do program fulfill that mission. And, it's just, I just wanted to add that because I think it's tricky even from that point forward. And then for the jurors to have to narrow it further to their pick is, with a festival like ours, when everything is kind of fulfilling that in a way,
Right.
It's educating, it's entertaining, it's, a quality piece of filmmaking. It's that part of it is very difficult, but I think it's a good problem to have.
Right. Yeah. We often say embarrassment of riches, and that's it's a great expression. What ultimately is important here is, as you said, getting into the festival itself is the first prize, right? Everybody who's gotten in has gotten these things. And so in many respects, I hate to view the next aspect as a competition, that I don't like to think of it as the filmmakers competing with each other, because it's not really the case. It really has to do with recognizing and pulling out the handful of films that are going to be representative of these important values or this important statement. That jury awards, it's such a fine line, because it's not always best. It's weird to say, but it's not always that this is the best film in general, but it's the best for the category. It's the best. It's specifically going to fulfill this part of what we're saying, and the combination of the awards presentation is a package itself. And you're saying this package of 6 films says something about the world and the Atlanta Jewish experience and the global Jewish experience in 2021. And there's something about that feeling, and that is important, that it doesn't take away from any film that doesn't get an award. It doesn't take away from any film that is otherwise just quote unquote just in the festival, but it really says that these six, this is your digest of everything you need to know, because these six are representative of this class, and they're going to stand and be what we're going to tell the world right now.
Exactly. I, again, couldn't have said any of that better myself. I think that's exactly right. So before we move on, because in this episode, I think we definitely want to highlight who our jurors are this year in the incredible slate of films. I did just want to go back and because if it is still on Netflix, I still recommend this film to everyone. And I didn't want to leave this whole part of the episode without mentioning the film I was referring to before is called They Are Everywhere, aka The Jews. I did remember correctly that it kind of has these two titles. It's from 2016, directed by Ivan Attal. And again, if it's on Netflix, I still recommend everybody view that film. It did not win the Human Rights Prize that in our jury that year.
It's in contention. Yes, they won a Netflix. It won a Netflix distribution deal instead. So it's a win for them. And this will be people's warm up to this year's festival if they haven't seen it. They're about to dive into a deep experience, but in the lead up, they can watch this as preparation.
Absolutely. And in this podcast, we're always bringing up, films from previous festivals, and I just can't believe I blanked on the title before. But yeah, definitely go seek that out. But as you mentioned, we are in the season of the 2021 annual AJFF. So let's just quickly highlight again who our jurors are. And, if you can kind of take that, Gabe, I'll just quickly run through the films that are in contention for these jury prizes this year.
Sure. And one thing that's going to make this year's experience unique, as we've learned this past year, we're going to do it through the virtual experience. So this is all going to take place in our favorite new platform. It's all going to be in Zoom. So it's fun because to this extent, I will miss having the jurors in the same room together and interacting. However, I think we've all become so accustomed now to this virtual experience that it should be seamless. And it actually gave us the flexibility to include some people who might not have been able to travel otherwise during a regular year. So this is going to be a unique and fun experience. So, obviously kicking off with the narrative jury, we have Golden Globe and Emmy nominated performer Diane Baker. We have film critic and commentator known for his work, particularly on CBS Sunday Morning, David Edelstein. And the third person on this jury will be a student from Emory University. And that's, again, the student component is such a fun part of that. So I can't wait to pop around in the Zoom rooms and just hear what their conversations are going to be like, because this one is going to be a really good one.
Definitely. And the films are just as incredible as the jurors for all of these categories, really. We have the other difference this year is because we do have a slightly smaller lineup of films with virtual and the length of time of our festival. We actually have 4 picks for each category. We do usually have 5 or 6, as Gabe mentioned. And so the 4 films for this are Asya, which is a poignant drama that claimed top prize at the Israeli Academy Awards. And it stars Shira Haas, who many of our listeners would know from Unorthodox. And she plays a rebellious teen dealing with a progressive illness and a fraught relationship with her free-spirited mother. We have the Auschwitz Report about 2 Slovakian Jews who risked their lives to bear witness to the horrors of Auschwitz. Then we have Here We Are, which is another Ophir Award winner. This is Neil Bergman's tender drama about a protective father's road trip with his autistic son. And we have Minion, a contemplative coming-of-age drama about a young closeted man in 1980s Brighton Beach.
You're seeing films that have literally won Ophir Awards, and they're going against each other for the top prize here at this festival. So there's something really telling about that, I think. Documentary tends to be one of the just most competitive and deepest categories at this festival, as we know. And as somebody who's also sat on the selection committee and participated in the programming portion of that, the level of work that comes in on the documentary front is off the charts. And so again, this is the competition level here is going to be very high. So we have somebody with a very, very familiar name on this jury. It's Nancy Spielberg, who's a producer of documentary and independent films, many of which have screened at the Jewish Film Festival. Peter Miller, who is an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker. And then we have a student from Georgia State University participating on the documentary panel.
And the films that they have to discuss in deliberations are Love It Was Not, about a Nazi officer who falls in love with a Jewish concentration camp prisoner. And this is a taboo romance with decades-long repercussions. We have On Broadway, which is a chronicle of the Great White Way, and it's packed with superstars and show clips. And then we have Rain in Her Eyes, in which one of Israel's beloved children's authors uncovers the dark truth behind a childhood trauma, and Till Kingdom Come, in which Emmy-winning Israeli filmmaker Maya Zinstein examines the dubious alliance between Trump-supporting evangelicals and Israel's right-wing factions. So some very difficult films, difficult topics. I think this jury will have their work cut out for them, but it'll be a great conversation that they'll have, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that, thinking I do not envy that jury. I think we have 2 hours to do the deliberation, and I'm worried there might not be enough time for some of these people to hash it out, because there is going to be a lot going on in that room. So that's going to be another terrific experience. The shorts jury, and again, short films are something that are remarkable and that really only get their due, I would argue, at film festivals and on the film festival circuit. That short films, they pop up from time to time, but the festival is really the greatest place to experience shorts. It's the greatest place to see the newest and most interesting films coming from the short filmmaking community. And so this is another just don't miss category, and it promises to be one of the great conversations during the festival. So that jury is led by, we're not led, but is anchored by Jessica Shaw, longtime entertainment journalist. We have a professor from Emory who's also been a former guest on this very podcast about shorts, and that's Nishenga Burton. And we also will have a student from University of North Georgia, where I actually do some adjunct teaching. So I'm very happy to see UNG represented on this panel.
Absolutely. And the shorts, as Gabe mentioned, we had a whole episode about shorts and some of the things that you mentioned about film festivals being such a important place for shorts. And these 4 shorts are, they're in contention for this jury prize for a reason. They are Cinema Rex, set in a 1930s Jerusalem cinematheque, and it's about a Jewish boy and an Arab girl who bond over their love of movies. It's animated as well, so that's always there's always some great animated short films in the mix at our festival. Then we have In Our Synagogue, which is a Kafka-esque fable in which a young boy obsesses over the meaning of strange animal sightings at a ragged, old Eastern European synagogue. We have Letters to God, about an embittered, grieving father confronted by strange events who must learn to forgive. And Mazel Tov Cocktail, which is a ferocious comic take on modern Jewish life and tropes, as told by a Russian Jewish teen living in Germany.
What a great title, too. That the title of that alone is remarkable. So moving forward, we then move into these other terrific categories. So we have the Emerging Filmmaker. And again, what's interesting about the Emerging Filmmaker is we're featuring a film, but really you're talking about the creative auteur voice behind that film. So we're honoring really a person for the work they're doing, and that's really remarkable. So we have a award-winning filmmaker, Bonnie Cohen, as well as cinematographer and former president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, who seems to know something about giving awards because they're the very people who produce the Academy Awards, John Bailey. And then we will have a student who is an Atlanta-based student, but who is currently attending NYU, sitting in on this jury as well. And again, I am very excited about honoring the emerging voices that are coming out.
Totally agree. And the fun part about this prize too is that while our jurors are going to obviously be watching the films and judging the films, we also do give them some bios to work with, just a little bit of background on these filmmakers. For the most part, these filmmakers have maybe made one feature in the past. We try to have it where, this is maybe their second feature, or maybe they've only done shorts or TV before. So there's even a huge spectrum within emerging filmmakers. And so our emerging filmmakers eligible for this prize this year are Johan Helgeland, whose film The Crossing is an astounding adventure story in which a young girl bravely treks across Norway's wilderness to save 2 Jewish child refugees. Karen Ben Raphael, who directed The End of Love, which is a clever digital age love story where a long distance relationship takes a growing toll on a French-Israeli couple who struggle to stay connected. It's also people have been talking about this film as, very relevant to our current digital era of having to really connect with people virtually. So that's definitely an interesting film here in the mix. And then we have Shiva Baby, directed by Emma Seligman. It's a comedy of discomfort about a teenage girl's secrets all threatening to come out and collide while at a funeral. And that is our, young professionals night film as well. So, that's just something to note there. And then last but not least, we have Thorsten Klein, the director of a film called Adventures of a Mathematician, which is a tantalizing account of the top secret Manhattan Project. It's about this brilliant Polish Jewish scientist who struggles with wartime loss and prophetic moral dilemmas at the dawn of the nuclear age. So huge variety there. That was part of why I kind of went into a little more detail. And again, huge variety in where these directors are kind of coming from, where they're at in their, early careers right now.
Yes. And next, we're going to go look at our Building Bridges jury, which again is a terrific collection of just interesting people. So we're starting with Gil Robertson IV, who is the co-founder and president of the African American Film Critics Association. Laura Shaw Frank is the director of contemporary Jewish life at the American Jewish Committee. And then the student presence and student oversight on this jury will be a representative from Spelman College.
And our films for this category are going to be Kiss Me Kosher, our opening night film. It's a screwball romantic comedy about a same-sex wedding being planned between 2 women of very different cultures. So this film crosses pretty much all borders. Then we have Breaking Bread, which is a foodie's delight. It's a documentary about innovative Arab and Jewish chefs who work in tandem to foster social change through mouthwatering dishes and a shared love of cooking. And next we got Sublet, which is a warmly affecting cross-generational melodrama from acclaimed director Eitan Fox. It's about a middle-aged gay American writer numbed by tragedy who finds solace in the company of a younger Israeli man. And They Ain't Ready for Me, a documentary about an energetic African-American rabbinical student leading a grassroots effort to save the ignored people of Chicago's South Side.
Just what a great cross-section of content and titles. So exciting. And just the opportunity to see these films alone is going to be terrific. So that's really a promising category. And then our final, but not least, but our final category we'll be discussing is the Human Rights Award. And again, the people on this are just remarkable, really. So we have Mark Potok, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Analysis of the Radical Right. He's formerly a senior fellow and top analyst for the radical right at the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm sure he has a lot of insight into some contemporary topics that he'll be able to share with us as well and bring that expertise to this panel. We have Kent Alexander, who is president of the Temple and also the co-author of The Suspect, the novel upon which Clint Eastwood's 2019 Richard Jewell film was based. And then we will round that out with a student representative from Kennesaw State.
And again, looking at a huge cross section of films here, we have 200 Meters, a narrative about a Palestinian father who embarks on a perilous journey to reach his hospitalized son. It's a tense yet tender family drama about the human toll of oppression. Then we have a documentary, A Crime on the Bayou, in which a young white Jewish attorney defends an unjustly accused Black teen in a landmark civil rights era case. We have I Am Here, another documentary about a spirited South African Holocaust survivor who on her 98th birthday reveals to her family her astonishing life journey. And last but again, not least, a documentary called Soros that demystifies the controversial financier who dares to tackle global problems. So it's a biography that really illuminates one of the world's richest philanthropists. So those are our jury members and our jury films. You can, of course, find out so much more about these films and our esteemed jurors in our program guide and on our website. And as Gabe mentioned, we certainly hope that you enjoy these films as part of the festival. But some of you may be wondering where and when you can find out about the winners too. And so as Gabe mentioned, our deliberations are going to be virtual, and virtual afforded us the opportunity to assemble this all-star roster of, incredible jurors. And so we're very excited about that. And so with that, we are actually going all out for kind of a bigger awards presentation that will be streamed on March 10th. And so much more info will be coming out on that very soon. But Gabe, without giving too much away, I thought we'd kind of close things out with just what you're kind of most excited about with that presentation. If, again, without giving away too many details, but just, again, what are you excited about with even this year's jury in general and all of the sort of unique components that this year kind of entails?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I think is interesting and an opportunity that we can embrace because it's virtual is the fact that traditionally when we do this as a live closing night presentation before the award, first of all, only a handful of people can get into that show because it's part of a different package and the seating is limited. Really to the point where we've had 2 closing night shows and the ceremonies in between. So there's a chance for everybody have access to it. That's the first and most exciting thing. So every listener can now be part of the award ceremony. But secondly, generally, we do the award ceremony at the end of the festival, which is, of course, natural. And by that point, most of the traveling filmmakers have gone because we build their travel around a schedule, right? They can come in for these 3 days and they have to leave and go back to wherever they're from and do work and so forth. And so generally, the filmmaker presence at closing night is not especially high, and it really is a celebration of the people who've attended the festival and a celebration for the festival itself. Because it's virtual this year, we will have the opportunity to incorporate a lot more of the participants into the ceremony in a seamless and integrated fashion. So hearing the voices of some of the award winners is also going to be an exciting thing to just experience and really take part of. It's going to make it look and feel a lot more like the kinds of ceremonies people witness when they watch the produced events of the Oscars and the Emmys and the Tonys and so forth. So it will be a produced event, and we'll have a lot of fun surprises as well as the feedback from some of the award winners themselves, which I'm really, really looking forward to. That wasn't too many surprises, right? I didn't give all the real secret stuff out today.
No, not at all. I think
people got to tune in because they got to really see the real surprises that are coming. But I was just whet their appetite.
Exactly. And I think after, all we did today was kind of describe a little bit of what these films are and who these jurors are. But I think after People have had a chance to really watch these films, read the jurors' bios in the program guide. They are going to be so excited, to kind of see what we do with that presentation and what the jurors thought. And every year, there are always some surprises, at least again, from the staff side. I'm always like, I'm always just so curious to see what the decisions were and why. And so you'll get to hear some of that as in a typical year, but really expand on, why the jurors picked the films they did. And I, again, think in a year like this and kind of having a little distance from the annual festival run itself, I think people are going to be really hungry for whatever we, put together with all of that in mind.
Oh, absolutely. I also think that we've built the kind of trust with audiences over time. And that's one of the things that I think the audiences who've grown to trust the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival will count on a unique and interesting experience. And that trust has been earned and is well-deserved and will yield dividends this year, because I think people who otherwise might think, oh, this is an off year, this is the virtual year, it's not worth even doing, they're going to be blown away by all of the things this festival has done to keep the spirit of the live experience going, and also to find new and interesting ways to present this content using the virtual platforms, but to really keep the community component, to keep the interactive and the engagement parts going, because that's what separates a festival from simply watching something on Netflix or streaming it online, that you are literally still part of a festival experience, even if it's on a virtual platform.
Yeah, 100%. I think that, we've mentioned it before, but that's such a goal for this year, is to kind of keep so much of what makes AJFF, intact, and even try to utilize virtual even more, and kind of say, well, yes, there are limitations and we can't see each other in a theater, but what are the really exciting opportunities that virtual affords us? And that's kind of been our mission for this year. So I think people will, I think this is going to be a big part of that. And again, kind of even more built out than it usually is. So I hope this has gotten everyone, excited. Again, Gabe, I thank you so much for kind of allowing our listeners and our audience a peek behind the curtain at jury in general and the importance of jury prizes, and certainly the highlights for this year's jury at AJFF as well. So thank you again, Gabe, really.
Well, thank you, Sara. It's been a pleasure to be here. And obviously I couldn't be happier to be part of it. So I'm glad to help out in any way I can.
As always, I'm Sara Glassberg. Producing and editing the show is our technical director, Chris Holland. My co-host is Brad Pilcher. Thank you again to our very special guest today, Gabe Wardell. The music you have been hearing throughout the episode is by the incredibly talented Joe Alterman. Please look him up wherever you get your music. Find more from us, as well as show notes, at ajff.org/inconversation. I should mention here that the episode we referenced earlier, the short film episode called What About Shorts, which aired December 10th, 2020, can be found also at ajff.org/inconversation. Our email address is inconversation@ajff.org. Drop us a question or a comment, and we might just include you on a future episode. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app of choice, or check out our YouTube channel for new episodes. Please give us a rating or a review. It all helps. But what helps perhaps more than anything is your financial support. We cannot continue to do this podcast or any of our other digital programs without the ongoing support of listeners like you. If you're willing and able, please make a donation at ajff.org/inconversation. And don't forget to tell your friends about the show. Until next time, goodbye.